being here. As Jen just mentioned, we're just giving folks a minute or two to make their way in. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat before we get going.
Okay, and it is 12:03 on my clock, so why don't we get started? Emily, do you want to put up the slides?
I sure do.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today at the last of our three series of Lunch and Learn activities, where we have been probing the issue of literacy in our K-12 students. Today, we will be engaging in the topic of considering best practices and what the beginnings of considering a shared Worcester response. This is the last of our series, but it's also the first of our series of meetings with members of the education ecosystem here in the city to start thinking about what a comprehensive community response can be to the reading crisis that will complement the work that's being done in the Worcester Public Schools. Emily? Thank you to our local partners and that our planning partners, that is Friendly House, Worcester Family Partnership, Worcester Public Library, Girl Scouts, Worcester Public Schools, United Way, and Edward Street. Thank you. Just to quickly go over as a quick review of what we've done in the last two sessions. Fewer than half of the third graders in our district, 27% actually, are proficient in the English language arts. That's speaking, reading, writing, and listening, according to MCAS data. As you can see from the chart, the results were significantly worse for Black students, Latino students, English learners, kids from low-income backgrounds, and students with disabilities. That's from Ron Noble, who spoke to us at our first session. So essentially, 1 in 4 kids is reading with proficiency. And as you all know, reading is the fundamental skill. It is the entry point for all other points in the curriculum. So it's critical that we do this. The good thing is it's reading. We can teach reading, and it's like babies walking. Once they learn how to walk, they take off on their own. And so that is one of the reasons why this is fundamental and so critical. Emily? Okay. Massachusetts is one of the top states in terms of reading until you begin to disaggregate the numbers and look at those subgroups that I spoke about previously. But you can see there how Massachusetts stand relative to other curriculum. One of the things that the state has started to do, and is actually now a national movement, is the move away from what had been called a balanced literacy approach to a science-based, brain science-based curriculum. The curriculum that the Worcester Public Schools has chosen is called Amplify, CKLA. I can never remember, I'm sorry, what the CKLA stands for. But it teaches reading in 2 ways. There are two approaches that the curriculum uses. One is teaching the core reading skills, what we would refer to as decoding. The other is teaching content. And so kids learn how to read. They also are gaining content knowledge in various subject areas. So there are 2 reading lessons a day, which gives us as a community a tremendous opportunity to think about what is in the knowledge part of that and how we can use that work, those areas to amplify what's going on in the schools. Um, Emily? Okay, we also last week had our research partners in this work, Hanover Research, presented Amanda Wagner presented on what are some of the programs that are going on here in Worcester. This represents information that is publicly available. We know that there is a lot more information out there. The kids who are involved in Jumpstart, for example, the kids who are 4 years old and are enrolled in non-Worcester Public School preschools, which is a number that's hard to pin down. So we have a lot that we can build on as we think about next steps to make the community response more robust. Emily? Okay, so for our agenda today, quickly, Amanda will be going through what she's uncovered as some of the best practices in family and parent engagement. We will then have a panel discussion moderated by Noe Medina. And on that panel will be Jason Homer, who's the executive director of the library, Beth Viets, who coordinates the Worcester Family Partnership, and Kim Davenport, who is vice president of initiatives and aligned programs at Edward Street. As I mentioned, Noe Medina will be serving as our facilitator. So let me pass the talking stick over to Amanda. And Amanda, I did not mean to suggest you should go through quickly. I meant that I was going through quickly. So take the time you need. Okay, Amanda.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'll turn it over really quickly before I get started into the best practices reports to my colleague Julie to just give an overview of the partnership and Hanover Research in general.
Thank you, Amanda. Hello, everyone. My name is Julie Shenefield. As Amanda said, I just want to kind of give a quick overview of who Hanover is and what we do and how we support districts throughout the country. If you were here last week, you had a chance to meet us, but about Hanover Research, we are a custom research firm. We work with school districts across the country, and we also work with educational service agencies, independent schools, and also several state DOEs. And through our partnerships, we work through a mixed methodology research approach. So what that means is that we can support our members through basically any type of research. So we can do secondary research, qualitative work, quantitative work, and survey work. And Dr. Amanda Wagner, who's here, is one who leads the work that we're doing with Worcester. And behind Amanda, we have over 200 researchers that work at Hanover that help support these initiatives. We also support members through advisory services, so that helps to build capacity within the districts. One of the areas that we do that is strategic planning. And throughout our partnership with WEC and Worcester Public Schools, we actually work to support the district in their strategic planning process, and we'll continue to help with the implementation of that strategic plan. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Amanda, who's going to go through some of the infographics we recently put together.
Thank you, Julie. It's my pleasure to be here today, everyone. For a little bit of context on these, what I'm about to share are the infographics. They were something that we distilled down a research report that we had completed. So we completed a best practices report, which was a robust research report, far too long to go through in the time that we have today, but we did go through that and then opted to, for this presentation, as opposed to sharing a PowerPoint, we wanted to give a handout or something that could be taken away. So these are infographics that can be handouts or pieces that can be utilized. And as I mentioned, they are a distilled down version of the best practices report that we completed. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and go through these. And if you have any questions, please feel free to stop me, ask me to pause. Oh, it looks like you can put them in the chat and I'll answer those at the end. I'd be happy to go back to anything as well. And you should be able to see my screen here. You could give me just a thumbs up before you're able to see what I'm sharing. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. So there are two infographics here, and they're both geared toward literacy strategies to support students. The first one here is geared toward family supports for student literacy. So we've got here, and our illustration here, I'll zoom in on each of these, but to show you, we've got kind of everyone has their own cog in the wheel of this all working together. So the first piece here is maintaining communication with teachers. So making sure that parents and guardians are maintaining that communication. And although there are a myriad of ways that you can communicate, we've distilled this down into some very high level, high yield strategies. So maintaining two-way communication with teachers and staying informed about your child or the student's progress. Addressing any concerns or issues related to literacy development. So not just skills-based, but that development in collaboration with teachers. And then also being sure that communicating any barriers to engagement with the school or literacy are happening. So if families have transportation challenges, schedule challenges, languages, whatever that may be, maintaining that communication so that the school is partnering with you on supporting the student. We also have practicing literacy skills at home. So helping the child to practice literacy skills by reading together, discussing books, and working on literacy-related activities. Visiting and checking out books from the local library is a great thing that families can do to booster those literacy skills. Also, if the family speaks a home language that is a language other than English, using those home language texts to promote literacy through the transfer of skills from one language to another. So that's often something that families see as a barrier if English is not the home language. And the research supports that encouraging literacy in the home language can encourage literacy skills and the transfer of skills into English. Participating in school activities. So getting involved, participating in family literacy nights, book projects, volunteer reading programs. Also, we know that the school has school-based teams and committees and councils to allow parents to have their voice heard and provide feedback. So making sure that you're taking advantage of those opportunities to provide that feedback and collaborate. And then lastly, engaging in the students' literacy learning. So understanding academic standards and literacy-related benchmarks appropriate to your child's age. Now, in this, that doesn't mean that you have to know that it's standard 1.2a, but families being aware of those developmental benchmarks and where their child should be progressing in those is powerful, because then they can be an advocate for their child as well as supporting the school in boosting those areas. Understanding how children learn to read and why they might struggle. So understanding those basic developmental pieces. And I know we covered it, Amanda covered it last week, and I know we've talked about, curriculums and those resources that have pieces that help to understand how children learn to read and the best practices in those. Just being aware and staying informed about reading and writing progress in school and discussing those goals. We also have a second page here that is at-home literacy activities. So this can be handed out not only for those best practice pieces, but then what are some activities that a family could do at home? So we've got some suggestions of family book clubs. So trading books with other families in the class or in the community. Storytelling, reading and telling stories or recording stories on a phone. Family fun or game nights at home where reading is involved. So things like, board games or card games. Reading is a part of so many of those pieces, and having the child read the directions. Family movie nights. So making sure you're reading the book and then watching the movie as a family. Table topics. So having in a bowl topics and pulling one out each night to discuss as a family. Have children read recipes while they're assisting in cooking. Also bedtime reading, so allowing the child to select a book depending on the age that you read to them or they read to you or both. Even as adults, we love to be read to at times, so that also will support the literacy skills. And then environmental labels, so reading road signs, grocery items, just immersing them in literacy through daily activities so that they understand the impact in real world application. Lastly, here we have some guiding questions for families. So these are broken down into the communicating often, discussing instruction intervention, practicing skills at home, and then addressing concerns together. And these are just some high-level suggestions for families. If sometimes it can be a challenge to know what questions to ask. And so we've got some guiding questions here for things to ask, such as, what are the school's goals for the children and families? How does the school partner with families when developing language and literacy goals? How can I support my child's language at home? How is reading taught and understanding that, and by whom? Understanding what the child needs to be able to do, what materials are needed, what strategies I could use with my child, and what tools are available for me to help, as well as how is the progress of my child being monitored and what might happen next if my child continues to struggle. So understanding the next steps and those pieces. And I will pause on, excuse me, on this one before I move into the community piece of the next one, and just see if there are any questions from you all on the family strategies infographic. Okay. Well, if you think of anything, again, feel free to pop it in the chat and I'll answer any questions. The other infographic we have here is focused on community partner support. So we have the one geared toward families, and now this is focused on collaboration with community partners and that support. So we've again distilled this down from the report into some high yield areas. Again, similar to the family, the first one being that partnership with the schools. So aligning vision and mission and those pieces of community entities with the district's literacy mission and vision, providing services that the schools themselves may not. So understanding what the school needs for support and being able to plug in, and collaborating with leaders to create new programs, resources, or services that enhance literacy for all students. Also, field trips and cooperative programming. So having that be able to provide it to the school of, field trips that focus on building literacy skills is very powerful. Also supporting the district literacy initiatives. So collaborating with the schools to support what they have going on through awareness or support of book distribution, student tutoring, or participating in programs. We had one spotlight, which was the Louisville Growing Readers program, which was kind of an exemplar in the research of community partnerships and a program that's able to make this actionable and has seen results. We also have literacy services and resources. So again, ways that you can partner tutoring or volunteering. It could be community members, high school students, college students, any members of the community serving as volunteers in the reading partner programs to kind of make sure that there are enough supports for some of those programs. And then out of school assistance, so referring families that need assistance in reading and writing to community agencies that provide out of school assistance. And I know you all have lifted up some today and some came up last week, as well as those that we found, identified in the literacy scan, but referring families to these programs that exist and are there for their supports. Supporting multilingual families. So community organizations can provide resources and books to accommodate families who speak diverse languages. Again, coming back to that, it doesn't have to always be English if the home language is different. making sure that families have resources and books in the home in whatever language they may speak. And then offering literacy opportunities and support. So helping students to build skills by engaging them in those interactive activities, reading aloud, discussing comprehension with the families, and providing materials for summer reading or interactive literacy homework. And here are, as I mentioned, some of those programs in action that we found as exemplars in the research. And we do have the QR codes here in this handout if someone's interested in learning more about some of these programs and what they are, how they function, any of the pieces there. We have those illustrated as well. And then lastly, the last part of this was we distilled this down into the 5 C's of successful school community partnerships, which we've got, and I'll zoom back in on all of these, but you can see common purpose, complementary content, communication, customized partnership, and continuous improvement and sustainability. Some big pieces of these, and I'll spare you me reading through all of them, but some highlights in each one of these is that the community partners understand the school's vision. They have a set of shared goals. They support a set of documented outcomes, and they have a system in place. Also that they're collaborating with teachers and school staff to align enrichment and curriculum with that of the core content, making sure that there's alignment between that and it's supporting what's happening as opposed, it's being complementary as opposed to supplanting what's happening. Meeting unmet needs and those that the school district may not be able to provide. And that clear, consistent communication between the leader of the school and the leader of the community partnership, which we know as an example, Worcester and WEC, this is a fantastic partnership. And I know you all are really adept in those partnerships, but just maintaining you have that clear, consistent communication, and leaders from the school and whomever the community partner may be, communicate regularly to understand and monitor the partnership and ways in which that could be improved or adapted. And then looking at partnership in general, just making sure that partners adapt existing or create new programming to meet the needs of students. So it's ever evolving, particularly out of the pandemic, and understanding the gaps that may exist for students and families. And so making sure that you understand those as they continue to evolve. And then the continuous improvement, seeing this as something that it's multi-year and continuous, of sharing responsibilities, relationship building, and offering those opportunities for everyone to build collegial relationships between the school division and teachers, as well as the community partnerships, and that there are systems established to ensure that the partnership continues in case there is a change of leadership. Making sure that you've got systems in place of if there's one point of contact between the school division and a particular partnership, wherever that may be, if there's a change, that there's structures in place to ensure that continues. So I'll pause here and see if there's any questions on the community or either of the infographics. Okay. Well, if there are any questions that come up, feel free to, as was mentioned, put those into the chat, and we're always happy to follow up with any resources as well. And the citations for this are available. Oh, I just saw someone raise their hand. Please go ahead.
Hi, sorry, I was trying to get my computer to work and I couldn't get to the screen to raise my hand. So I wanted to ask, there was a lot of really amazing information there, and I may have missed it in the writing notes and watching what was on the screen. Any discussion about the libraries in elementary schools and how that supports that? Because I know in Worcester that's a big issue that we're looking at right now from a volunteer, from a parent, from a community advocate perspective, that I wanted to just see if there was any piece in there that connected that dot.
That's an excellent question and an excellent point. So these focused on ways in which communities can support the students as a community entity or the school, as well as parents. So we did not focus on anything in this that's within the school's purview. Typically the libraries, and it varies by district, but the libraries fall under school resources and those pieces. So that's always something that we can look into, but that's definitely something, as mentioned, with the libraries, as well as immersing in literacy, that's powerful for students to just be immersed in books. But we did not include the school in this.
Because that's a lot of the volunteer capacity that happens in the elementary is, coming outside and in. So,
Oh, I understand. You're saying about
Yeah.
volunteer. So we did mention the volunteer reading. Tutors, high school students can come in and read. I know there's a lot of mentor programs in the schools for coming in and reading, and you're absolutely correct. That's a very powerful thing to have community members and others come in and read to the students.
great. Thanks for your info.
Yeah, thank you.
Related to that, Dina, is the question of the libraries, and I don't want to step on Jason's toes here, but the year that we did the One City, One Library, we identified the schools that did not have libraries in the zip codes where there was suppressed use of the library, or less take up of use of the library by number of either books taken out by zip code or number of people with a library card by zip code. We also complemented that with classroom libraries for some of the teachers. That was a while ago, and you know what battering classroom library books can take. So that might also be something that we want to think about. So, any other questions for Amanda before we move on? No? Okay, I am going to pass things over then to Noe Medina, who will be facilitating our panel today.
Thank you, Jen, and again, welcome folks for joining us. So I'm going to pose a couple of questions for our panel to respond to. As we go, feel free to post any questions in the chat, either for the panelists or for Amanda, and we'll try to get to them after we hear from the panelists. So the questions, two questions we'd like you to consider in your comments. First, how can we apply these practices to Worcester? And then second, what is already happening in Worcester that you're aware of that we can build from? So let me turn over to Jason first to since he's already unmuted himself to start.
I will be, to be fair, it told me to unmute myself, so I just followed directions, Beth and Kim. I think I might just try to go with the first question so that others can jump in. And I know that that when the topic of libraries came up, Kim was ready to say something, so I also want to give space to that. I think, when we think about applying the lesson shared, I think one of the important call outs is the kind of one of the last points is the continuous process of it. And I really think that we need to focus and in fact challenge a little bit on doing a better job of creating a two-way street on that, of the back and forth of those. I think, as we look at library services, which is what brought me here to this, as for the kind of good of the conversation, it's important to call out that for library services in elementary schools in our Worcester Public Schools, there are 4 branches of the Worcester Public Library staffed by non-professional librarians, paraprofessionals. It's not a dirty word for us. That is, they do not have a degree in library and information science. They are not a school library media specialist. They have librarians supporting them from above, but not inside. So that's kind of starts that kind of space where we really need to dig in on the best practices for literacy if we're not having the librarians embedded the whole time. All of the other students, the some almost 30 elementary schools, are served often by parent volunteer organizations or by Libby and Lily, the two bookmobiles for the public library. But again, that is highly transactional, not digging into the literacy, not digging into the reading piece. And so, for us, it's a lot about the parent education aspect of it, that parents need to participate in the learning and literacy, and making sure that they help develop. But in many cases, we also have to teach parents to love literacy at the same time as we're teaching children to love literacy. So we're teaching a whole family. And so I think I might pause with that, and I'm ready to answer other things, but give space to my co-panelists.
Thank you, Jason. Well, let me ask Beth to um, share her responses to the two questions.
Okay. I'm here representing early literacy, I think, and that's an area where parents are very involved. Starting at birth, parents get to read to children and share a love of literacy with children. And I do think it's important that we frame it as a positive and a get to rather than a have to. Sometimes the messaging we do comes across as putting more pressure on parents. There's a famous Mem Fox quote that I'm going to paraphrase about when you tell someone to read, make it sound like chocolate, not medicine, which I'm sure Jason is all behind. But starting really early, differences in literacy skills are visible. The amount of vocabulary a family has and uses affects their school success. So there are a lot of things we can do starting early that will make a difference going forward. And while I'm here, I do want to say a quick blurb about Worcester Family Partnership, which provides playgroups and family literacy nights and home visits to families in Worcester starting at birth. There are lots of other programs that take place even in the hospital, coaching parents about the importance of reading. And I do think working together and supporting the family in that and supporting each other so we have consistent messaging. Parenting young kids is hard, and supporting people who support young parents is hard. So how can we support each other in the work? And I'll pass to Kim.
Thanks, Beth, and thanks, Jason. You guys set the table beautifully for thinking about families and access. And I do want to underscore and lift up Jason's comment about, the access to books is so important, and the library works really hard to have those points of contact with the community and to make sure there are opportunities for children to have books in their hands and to be able to take them home. And I think there's some amazing partnerships that have happened over the years to create Libby and Lily, and they get them out and about. And I think even during the pandemic, we kind of upped our games as to where Libby and Lily were going and how often and how could we make that happen. And I think that's tremendous. And the research follows that access to books is one of the single most connected data points to drive literacy later. And so they need them in their hands, they need them in their homes. And I think it's a combination of libraries, of story hours, as well as home libraries. And I think there are efforts underway in small ways and large ways at family literacy nights, at Edward Street Day of Play, Family Festival, and through Jumpstart, like to get books into homes with children, to provide kind of that additional book, that because when it's right there and they have easy access, children will look, families will read. I also want to underscore that there is a real need for us to emphasize that learning to read is something that starts with talking, singing, playing. It starts with how you interact and engage with your youngest child in whatever language is your home language and comfort language, and those skills do translate later. So starting early and having just even the basics, read, sing, talk, play, and making sure families feel that and understand that and are valued in that is really helpful. If I were to kind of push forward a little bit to say, what can we do as a community, and how can we think about what happens for the children across all the environments that they're in? I think we have some work to do to think about some grounded professional development for adults that are in community organizations looking to understand the how they can support literacy, the best efforts, the latest research and the science of reading, as well as families. We have to make it digestible to them too. So thinking about families getting access to this information in ways that is digestible. And there are ways the schools can do that, that programs can do that. And there are even tools like that we have in our community, like Ready for K, that's or Parent Powered, which are text-based messages that are delivered in short little blurbs about what you can do at home, easy activities to engage with your child at the age-appropriate level to develop all of these skills. I think we have a ways to go with screeners. We need to be thinking about that in concert with Worcester Public School leadership to figure out like what screeners make sense. There's early bird screeners to help identify dyslexia earlier, because that is a component that when addressed earlier, you can have greater reading success later. There's also a need for, and we should be looking out and finding kind of the multilingual screeners and assessment tools, because often children that are multilingual learners don't have tools that help assess where they are in their reading development, because the tool itself is based in a language that they're not yet proficient in. So we can't really see where the issues are or to figure out where the interventions are. I think there are programs like the academic parent teacher teaching teams from West Ed that show a model of how you bring families in schools together with teachers to focus on specific areas of literacy development and what your child's development is, where they are and what they need at home. And then you practice those skills with parents, and then they go home and they can do them. I think there's some really powerful models that we can look to, and I'm sure they're also happening inside of our schools as well. We just have to find them and raise them up. And then finally, I would say that we need to reinvigorate some kind of community-wide response, which I think Jen's going to speak to towards the end. Years ago, in I think it was 2017, we created Worcester Reads, which was a community response to kind of making sure we built a culture of reading in our community. It was tied to the campaign for grade level reading. We developed a 20 minutes a day kind of motto to help families just think about, it's just a small amount of time, but how powerful. We had a central calendar with activities, and it's more that it just hasn't been leveraged as much. We had a little thing called the pandemic in the middle here, so that kind of created some stoppages. But what would our community response be? What's a backbone, and how can everyone hook in is kind of where I'm hoping our conversation with our panelists and all of our guests can go.
If I might, I knew that Kim was going to invigorate me, and that's what I was like banking on. So I think there's like a few things I want to call out and kind of connect back to the original question, and that is the kind of I think Kim, you said the read, sing, talk, play piece, and I think that's so connected with storytelling and how powerful storytelling exists within cultures all throughout the world, and how we can teach our families and our parents that is a gateway to this, and sharing stories even when they may be stories of a different location are really important to build those fundamentals. And so I was just one of my notes on the like how do we apply those practices as I was listening, really interested in calling out that piece and how important storytelling is, not just for building skills, but also childhood brain development and the cognitive flexibility children get from those, perspective taking, communication skills. And so that piece feels really important to echo, thumb up, whatever I want to, whatever emoji I want to give to it. And I also really love and want to tack on to that grounded professional development, but also saying some like kind of grounded community development. So one thing to kind of jump what is happening in Worcester, that I've been working on from the public library perspective is on this April 30th at 5 p.m. We'll be working on doing a kind of mass call to all of the parent teacher organizations that are working on their libraries and their schools, hearing what they need, and ultimately, spoiler alert for everyone, part of it is a listening tour to figure out what kind of development we can offer, the public library can offer its community on making sure that these are the most useful for our students and for our schools. And so I think that element is really an important piece that has me excited. And I think that's almost uniquely Worcester in the kind of grassroots collaboration piece of it that's working really well here. But I also want to end my diatribe with making sure that we are ensuring that our opportunities that we are giving our parents and families match their reality, and that reality does not always exist. It's not belittling any work that's being done, but sometimes we have, I obviously do not need to continue to work on a Tuesday at 5 p.m., but it's important that we figure out the times that match the times when families can come with like whether it's sitting, and I know that especially WEC always considers that in things, but it is something that we have to stay grounded in all of this talk, to think about some of our families are single parent families, multi-job families, and how do we make sure that they are included and their voices are recognized in spaces. So I just as we kind of continue to name stuff, I want to name that.
Thanks,
I think
Jason.
to add to that, some of the messaging can be really doable for families no matter where and when they are. Talking is teaching. I'm not saying that's easy, but it's doable for a parent, even if you don't have books, to talk about what's happening. And we just need to expand awareness that really is a valuable thing to have happen. Okay, Noe, sorry.
I was just going to invite you to share any further comments. You jumped in, and that is just fine. I prefer a panel that self facilitates.
Self-moderating.
Yeah, I just sit back and look.
I did want to add two things to the mix of the conversation. So one, because you asked, what's happening that is out there that we should know about and think about. I think and I believe it was on that Hanover research infographic as one of the literacy programs, but we have a summer literacy initiative in Worcester that's been many, many years, more than a decade underway. And it connects to summer camps and summer programming as a primary vehicle for thinking about how we embed literacy. And the partnership is what I want to lift up. So it's a partnership in bringing a Worcester Public School ELA, or English Language Arts coach, embedding them and connecting them to summer programs, and figuring out with staff how to create those fun learning opportunities that are literacy rich and literacy based, and kind of embed them so that children are enjoying that learning experience, as well as having some more directed pull-out groups or supports that are needed for students that have been identified. So there's that wonderful concept. It takes resources to do, but what a creative collaboration that we have between the Worcester Public Schools talent and educators and the summer programs that are supporting our children throughout the week, all summer long. And then the other point that I wanted to raise, which I wasn't sure we've touched on it in other lunch and learns, is just the critical importance of having data and sharing. I think Jen mentioned it earlier too. And I think we need to know where our children are, what they need, and what's working. And that's the biggest thing, whether you're looking at Reading Partners or Jumpstart or the Louisville Growing Readers Program or our own programming, like the Summer Literacy Initiative, being clear about what data we're looking at and how we're looking to see if we're moving the needle for children is really important. And so the data piece is something that we have to, I think we have an opportunity to get better at, both in understanding what data we need, but then also in sharing data and figuring out what that looks like between the schools and community providers and those that are all working on behalf of supporting children's literacy efforts, today we're talking 0 to 8, essentially, right, to 3rd grade.
And I think just one point of the data comment you just made, Kim, is I think also using that data to target the services on the kinds of needs that students have and building on the kind of strengths they have. And I think, that's the other thing I think is sort of critically important with data. So let me pose a question to Beth that Emily mentioned in the chat. So how does the work that Worcester Family Partnership does, particularly the home visits, how do you think it might allow opportunities for the kind of two-way continuous relationships with families that Hanover raises as a best practice?
Sure. We are the Worcester site for Parent-Child Home Program, now Parent-Child Plus, which is a national home visiting model. We visit a family for 2 years, twice a week for a half hour. So in that time, like, you really have to develop a relationship, and you're going into a home. So you definitely have a relationship with the families that's a little different from any other setting. It is targeted at educationally at-risk families, and for next year we're funded for 33 families in Worcester, so it's pretty small in terms of need. But we bring books and toys to the home and work with the caregiver in the home, coaching them on how to use those to promote child development. And then those supplies are left with the family. So it does build a home library of books and toys. And it also coaches parents on talking, playing, singing together, and some basic reading skills. We do have an adaptation of that program that visits family childcare settings too, which is a 6-month model, but that reaches children who might be in care. But I think when you're working with someone ongoing, you develop those relationships naturally. Certainly we see that in our play groups too. We have some families who come very consistently. And you need a certain amount of relationship to nudge families forward, I think. Sometimes that's easy to develop, and sometimes it's more of a challenge.
And do you see those relationships being something that can then connect families, where you can serve sort of an intermediary for other organizations, the school district or other organizations in working on this issue as well?
Right, absolutely. Part of the role is connecting families to other services and helping them enroll in preschool or supporting them through assessment processes. And when we're there in the house, it's very easy for families, I think, to ask a question that it's not a public setting.
Thank you. To follow up a little more on this issue of kind of engaging the family in this process, the district has created a new office of family and community engagement. What thoughts do you have about how that office could support family engagement, particularly around literacy? Also, the wraparound coordinators that have been placed in each one of the schools that work with that office, I think, are another piece of this. So, just wondering if you folks have thoughts on what role that office could play.
Deb is actually here, and I saw
Yes.
her pop on camera. So I don't want to speak for her, but I think the role is to help connect families to those community services and meet family needs. And also to take a little bit of the pressure off. You know, it's hard to focus on your child's reading when you're worried about your child eating.
True. True. May I add something quickly too? And I am very, very glad that you spoke about the language diversity within our district. We have over 107 languages spoken in our district. Some of them just oral languages, which does not include the literacy piece yet. And some of that contributes to the 58% of students whose first language at home is not English. So how are we going to tailor like these opportunities for families that are themselves learning the English language, right? So it's a dual process. It's the process of teaching the family a second language and at the same time having the child acquire the reading skills and literacy skills that are going to be in a language at the school that is different from the one that is spoken at home. So with that said, our office is always looking at these stats, at this data, and we look forward in collaborating with all of you with regards to how we can support that 58% of families that constitute our district into having accessible resources for them when teaching children, you know, basic literacy skills.
Thank you, Deb. Appreciate your sharing that with us. Jason, do you have anything to add? Jason?
I'm happy to go. So I think one thing that has been we've seen on the public library aspect from that office is kind of creation, establishment, increase, all that jazz, is really kind of focused on this kind of community partner building piece. I know that we've worked with them on the library end and been funneled quite a few of the parents to do the support that we can do with learning. Having right now we have people who are focused on helping people find ESOL courses, whether those are, and we try to provide our own free ones and try to get partnership with all of the others. And so I think, specifically in regards to literacy, we're kind of seeing it grow all the time, and we're seeing it from my perspective, I think we're seeing it a lot of relationship building, kind of right back to that relationship piece. And that is really the power of this kind of collaborative, and the power of what we're doing right now is really building the network so that we have this web of support, so that we don't lose we lose as as few as possible. And I would love to say nobody, but we know that the systems are in place that don't work towards that. So figuring out who we can tap for when it's the best to go to this department, to Edward Street, when it's best to go to the library, and I really have been seeing that kind of put in action in this, which has been exciting for me from the library's perspective. Definitely feeling like it's a two-way partnership piece, back and forth, handing people back and forth, and that has been exciting from our perspective.
Kim, anything you'd like to add?
Sure. Great focus on the adults in the equation, right? Because it's all the adults have to change the conditions so that children have what they need, right? We're always talking about what do you need to change? It's the adults' behavior and engagement and interaction. And I think one of the biggest takeaways outside of relationships is really figuring out how we're building trust with our families, and trust with those who may have different levels of literacy, may have different access to the language, may have other needs that need attending to. And so building off of trusted relationships and connecting literacy and engagement in language and literacy through trusted handoffs and connections, I think is really important. I think of programs that approve this through pediatric practices. So the Reach Out and Read is another national organization that works through pediatric offices. And at one point we had all but one pediatric practice in Worcester participating in that. And they were delivering the message of read with your child, or let's connect on a question that was around talking and singing and playing with your infant, and or noticing that there might be challenges, and how do you help a parent kind of get what they need at that next level. But we have those trusted relationships for families in other ways as well. And I think a group that we want to bring to the table are our culture broker organizations. I think they're key to connecting and understanding not only the what those families need, but also understanding the cultural context in which they're coming to what is a very American view of language literacy and reading, and that is not always shared in the same way with all cultures. So we have some learning that we need to do, particularly with 107 different languages and multicultures in our city. So I will leave my comment at that.
Thank you. So another question for the panel. What would you suggest to organization, caregivers, or others in the community who are interested in addressing this literacy crisis? How can they get involved? How can an organization, organization leadership, individuals, and others get involved in this effort? What can they do? Anyone want to take a first crack at this? Jason.
I'll do it. Come to the library. No, no, so we'll start. We'll start. But that's, I think we are all as members of organizations, as leaders of organizations, as members of a community, responsible to be part of that kind of trusted handoff piece, to be part of working in developing. And so, I think to answer the kind of question on how community organizations who may not be involved in this work can start getting involved is like, the very first thing to do is to show up. I mean, if it's uncomfortable for an organization, imagine what it feels like to be that person that doesn't speak the language and needs to advocate for their child. And how often those we kind of expect people to come to us, but we also need to be out there for them and kind of meeting them where they are. And I think that's it's about tapping in. And the schools have so many tendrils and so many things, positive tendrils, maybe that's not the nicest word, but in so many different neighborhoods and community organizations. It can start with a small conversation in a basement of a church that's just serving these few people from this area that have come together or found each other through just word of mouth channels. And it's about us making sure that larger community organizations also create space for them. And it's responsible on all of us to create the space so that people who are having those lived experiences are able to have their voice. If they're going to give us the trust, we have to do a little bit more to make sure to elevate that. So I guess that's my first crack. And we'll see what my brilliant panelists give that. I was going to say layup, but I'm not even sure what that is. So sports ball.
Beth, Kim, anything you'd like to add in terms of responding to that question? Go ahead, Beth.
Guess I would just echo elevating the work and supporting it. It all takes funding, it takes advocacy. As we've been sitting here, the state budget has dropped from the House. I know that, You know, our program has been level funded for 10 years and costs go up. So just advocating for community programs is something that I think anyone can do and start learning about what's happening within Worcester. I mean, anyone who's here is certainly taking steps in that direction. There are also ways you can volunteer or collect books or things like that, but I think the real need is advocating that the work is important.
Thank you, Beth. Kim, you want to bring us home here on this?
Ditto to both of my co-panelists. I think advocacy is a huge piece, and I think you can do it in small and large ways. I mean, talking about literacy and talking about where we want to be as a community is important. So whether you're at your backyard barbecue or at a workplace meeting, and you have a voice and can raise the question: what are we doing? What could we do? And how can we do more of the good things that need to be happening? Because there are a number of amazing programs and initiatives that are happening in Worcester, but they're just not funded at scale or supported at scale. And to Beth's point, and I was going to raise it for her, like that Worcester Family Partnership and the CFCE grant is pivotal to so many amazing programs in our community, and to have it level funded for 10 years and continue to ask more, it just doesn't make a lot of sense. So I'd say talk to your reps, talk to city council, talk to your school committee members, talk to your state senators. Like, there's just having a conversation and saying it's important and what can we be doing about it, or highlighting something that you've seen that looked really great and you want them to kind of keep an eye on it, or act on your behalf. As constituents, we have very powerful voices, and that even what I call micro advocacy of just talking and raising the questions is so important.
Thank you, Kim. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to pass it back to Jen now to close the session. Appreciate all the great information you guys gave us.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to Amanda, and thank you to our panelists, and thank you, Noe, for great facilitation of that. As I said, this is the last of our Lunch and Learns, but really the first of the work that we will need to do to bring us together as part of an ecosystem. So keep your eye out for an email to try to get us together. Anyone who has an idea to contribute certainly is welcome to this table to talk about what our next steps are. Two things that are coming up that I hope everyone has on their calendar. On May 1st, we will be hosting Secretary of Education for the Commonwealth, Patrick Tutwiler, and our Superintendent of Schools, Rachel Menares, in a screening of the film The Right to Read. The Right to Read was produced by LeVar Burton, and you all know his name, not just as Geordi on Star Trek, but also as the longtime host of Reading Rainbow. And it's a film that talks about the critical skill of reading and poses the concept that reading is a fundamental civil right in a democracy. That will be at the AC Hotel, starting at 5:15 on May 1st. We will open with a networking reception, music by the Burncoat Jazz Ensemble, and then we will begin the work. This will be a call to action. So I hope that everyone who is interested in acting on this will be there. You should receive information, if you have not already, in your mailboxes. Excuse me. The other event will be on April 27th, and this is a family-focused event at the YMCA about raising readers together and what the community, the schools, and families can do to begin to raise this next generation of readers. It's an event for the whole family, and it will be from 10 a.m. to noon at the YM. Okay. Emily, did I leave anything out?
No, all good. Thanks, Jen.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Noe. Thank you, David, who provided a translation for us today. As they say, onward, we will be in touch and we have work to do, all of us together. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.